Hey, Michael from Magnanimous here, and today we'll be taking a deep dive into the RED Komodo, the newest addition to our growing lineup of RED cinema cameras. We'll be breaking down all the new features, how to work with the camera, and everything you'll need to know to get started shooting with one of the most versatile RED cameras to date. So, what's new? Well, the Komodo offers a remarkable image in the tiniest package yet, weighing in at just 2.1 pounds and just slightly larger than a 4-inch cube. The Komodo can go places no other RED camera can. Be it gimbals, action rigs, or handheld needs, the first thing that'll catch you is just how small and lightweight the Komodo really is. It features a standard 1/4-20 and 3/8-16 mount on the bottom that's compatible with most tripods and quick release plates, as well as 4 1/4-20 accessory mounts on top with a cableless contact point compatible with a variety of accessories. Our kit includes a very useful side handle with a record start stop trigger built in, which I find a welcome addition if I won't be rigging the camera onto something. Inside, the Komodo boasts a new 6K 19.9 megapixel Super 35mm CMOS sensor with a global shutter. For those not familiar, a global shutter synchronizes image capture across the sensor's pixels, making it so that each pixel captures light at the exact same time. This prevents the bending or skewing or the blurring of the image that you'll get with a digital rolling shutter, which captures light in bands, one right after the other. Those artifacts of the sensor can be extremely distracting, especially during action scenes, fast camera moves, or shots with objects rotating on screen. On its front, the Komodo features a new Canon RF lens mount, making it widely compatible with lenses using commercially available lens adapters. Be it our kit's included RF to EF mount adapter with optional variable ND, or this wooden camera PL mount, which expands the lens options to higher-end cinema lenses. Utilizing CFast media, the Komodo can record RED code RAW in 6K up to 40 frames per second and 2K up to 120 frames per second, and also features streamlined compression control for the R3D files, offering 3 variations in compression: HQ for VFX and high detail scenes, MQ for cinema and high-end TV, and LQ for online content, documentary, or shots that require long unbroken takes. This makes raw video capture easier than ever, and the Komodo still boasts robust ProRes capture, offering Apple ProRes 422 in 4K 60 frames per second and 2K 120 frames per second. Some other welcome improvements: there's an integrated touchscreen monitor on the top of the camera, but there are also control buttons next to it if you prefer tactile buttons. A dual battery mount on the back offers hot swappable power from Canon-style BP955 batteries. But you'll also notice, on the right side, we have a new Wi-Fi antenna, which can be used for wireless camera control, monitoring, or streaming. The last new feature is still in its beta phase, as it's a work in progress, but the Komodo's equipped with autofocus with Canon EF and Select RF lenses. This is a new feature, and future firmware updates will likely bring even more functionality, but as of the recording of this video, I find the single-shot autofocus is reliable, but the continuous autofocus is too slow for practical use in my opinion. Now you know all of the new features, so let's get into the nitty-gritty on how you work with this camera and get it ready to shoot, starting with a full overview of the body and the I/O ports. The right side features your main air intake and the previously mentioned Wi-Fi antenna, as well as your power switch and your main record button. On the left side of the camera, you'll find the main exhaust port, as well as your media bay and audio ports. As mentioned, the Komodo records to CFast media. Our kit includes 2 512GB RED Pro CFast cards, but the camera also is compatible with SanDisk 512, 256, and 128GB cards. It is important to note though, the Komodo is not compatible with all CFast cards, so check RED's website for a full list of compatible media before using third-party cards. Below that, you'll see your audio ports. You have a 3.5mm stereo input and headphone output for bringing in higher-end audio and monitoring your levels. Both sides also feature 2 M4 accessory mounts, compatible with a few different accessories, my favorite of which is a small little wing grip that I find super helpful. To attach it, just take the included Allen key and feed it into the 2 socket cap screws on each end. The wing grip is nice as it gives an extra handhold, as well as an additional 3/8/16 and 1/4-20 mounting points, further expanding the mounting options. Whenever I'm not rigging the camera, my typical setup is the wing grip on the left and the record start stop handle on the right. To attach the record grip, line up the 2 silver registration pins and secure it using the included Allen key and the 2 socket cap screws. The wing grip also can work as a helpful L bracket to flip the camera for vertical video if you need to finish for mobile. Just tie the 3/8/16 mounting screw to your quick release plate into the center and voila, your camera is flipped 90 degrees. Moving to the rear of the camera, you'll notice that it's pretty stripped down with only an extension port, an SDI video out, and the DC power input. It is important to note that the Komodo only has one video output, and that's the SDI, which is very sensitive. So plan accordingly if you'll be doing additional monitoring or tying the Komodo into any larger setup. And a big note here on the best safety practices with the SDI port. There have been issues with this port getting damaged due to ungrounded power from SDI accessories. So whenever you work with this and an external monitor, make sure that you power on both the camera and the monitoring device before you connect the SDI cable between them. And the reverse goes for powering down or hot swapping batteries. Always disconnect the SDI cable first, then power down or swap batteries on either device. Following that will ensure that the SDI does not get damaged. With that said, I find monitors like this SmallHD 702, which offer pass-through and signal conversion, are great to expand the Komodo either for HDMI connections or larger Video Village monitors. As of recording this video, the Komodo still has limited compatibility with RF lenses. So I recommend using the included RF to EF lens adapter, which will give you aperture and focus control, as well as an optional variable ND. To use the variable ND, first mount the adapter to your camera by removing the body cap, line up the red dots, and twist until you hear it lock into place. On the side of the adapter, you'll see a removable tray with clear written in the side of it. Remove the clear filter by grabbing onto the thumb hold and pressing down the release on the bottom and sliding it out. Then we're going to remove the variable ND from its plastic case and slide it into the adapter with the ND dial facing up. You should hear it click into place. Then be sure to return the clear filter to the plastic case to keep it safe. You can now adjust the strength of the variable ND by spinning the adjustment dial up and down. The ND has a range from ND3 to ND500, which is equivalent to approximately 1.5 to 9 f-stops. Now that our camera's all set up, let's go over the new interface. If you've worked with other RED cameras, then the menu and interface won't be too difficult to pick up, as it keeps the same core info, but optimizes it for touchscreen controls on the smaller monitor. You have 2 main ways of adjusting these settings. You can use the touchscreen to do everything, but if you're like me, you like tactile buttons, so you also have button controls along the right side. I'll go over both the touchscreen and the button controls so you can find the one that best fits your shooting style. Our bottom boxes control all major camera settings, including in order the current recording frame rate, ISO or sensor sensitivity, iris for electronic lenses, shutter angle or speed, and white balance. Each of these can be adjusted by touching and scrolling the white bar that pops up or by toggling the red box to the setting and using the arrow keys and hitting the select/function button. Then use the arrow keys to adjust the setting and select to exit. A couple notes here for those not familiar with RED's frame rate structure. There are 2 frame rates that you control, the recording frame rate and the project frame rate. The recording frame rate is the frame rate that's being captured in the camera, and the project frame rate is the finished clip frame rate that is viewed when playing back footage. If your recording frame rate is adjusted higher than your project frame rate, the resulting video will be in slow motion. If it is adjusted lower than the project rate, it will be in fast motion, either of which is referred to as variable frame rate. We will go more in depth on project frame rates later, but for now, just know that the frame rate you adjust here is the recording frame rate, so you can quickly and easily switch between normal and slow motion by adjusting this. Your main project or clip information can be viewed just above in the box, including timecode at the top, current clip, duration, resolution and codec with frame rate below. If you do enter variable frame rate, your frame rate will be displayed as a fraction, recording frame rate over project frame rate. In this case, 40 FPS recorded as 24 FPS. On the left side, you'll see the newest iteration of RED's exposure goalposts. You may also hear these called traffic lights. The Komodo's display simplifies these tools by giving you one goalpost for each section of your sensor's pixels: red, green, and blue. The goalposts are separated by a middle dividing line, and the area above the line will fill as the particular pixels on the sensor become overexposed, and the traffic light on the top will highlight when overexposed pixels begin clipping. Same for below, the bar will fill as those pixels become underexposed, with a warning for pixels not being able to discern information in your shadows. So, a balanced exposure would find all three bars right around the middle line. For a more detailed view of the RGB light spread on the sensor, you can tap the project information box to switch to an image color histogram, which will display an overlay for each individual color channel for a more detailed view. To the right of our project settings, you'll see your audio readout. The Komodo records up to 4 channels of audio in a 24-bit 48 kHz recording. Channels 1 and 2 are for the internal monaural microphone, and 3 and 4 are for the uncompressed 3.5mm input. If you select the audio meters, they will expand into your quick access audio controls. Here, we can adjust each channel's level as well as which channels are recorded. The left side will show your headphone output, and the green light will be on if it's outputting, as well as the channels that are being monitored in red. You can also adjust the headphone volume by sliding up or down using the touchscreen monitor. Under Audio Source, you can select between the recorded sources by selecting the box and highlighting it green. I prefer to keep the internal microphone always on as a scratch mic and will toggle the external on as needed. The levels of each channel can be adjusted individually, and if you would like to unlink channels, simply unselect the link button at the bottom and they can be set individually. Levels can be visually monitored on the right where you have a larger audio meter display. I generally aim for levels around the -10 mark. I was pleasantly surprised to find the Komodo will record audio even when shooting in variable frame rates, which previously hasn't been available. This makes toggling slow motion much more practical for documentaries, run and gun, or live production. Next to the audio, you'll see a large red cam button. Currently it shows Cam A, but the letter display does change depending on the camera ID you choose during formatting. To begin recording, you can either tap that icon or hit the red record button on the right side of the camera. A red outline will then pop up, showing that the camera is rolling. Do know that when you stop recording, there will be a writing period where the red record outline will turn yellow as the file is finished being written. It is important to give the camera a moment to finish this process before ejecting media or pulling power, as this is the camera finalizing the video file. The top of the display has a status bar which shows general connection info and your main menu button for touchscreen controls. Starting in the top left, the red logo with the arrow is your main menu button. Simply tap it to pull up the menu. You can also access this menu by hitting the menu button on the right and using the arrow keys to navigate and select button to confirm choices. But we'll close it for now to finish going over the main UI. Next to this, you'll see a CF card icon, which displays your connected media. It'll be grayed out if a card needs formatting or cannot be accessed. Let's pop our CFast card in so you can see what that looks like. As you can see, it's gray right now because we don't have a card in. To mount our media, we'll pull back on our media door release, and the door springs open. Your media will connect with the 3 arrows facing towards your exhaust port. The media card does not click into place, but it will fully seat and won't be able to be pushed in further. You will also see the CF card logo turn green when the media connects, and you will have a readout for the estimated record time based on your current record settings and available media. An important note, the RED Komodo uses a form of active writing on its media. This means it's very important to eject your media prior to pulling a card. If you don't, it can result in corrupted or lost footage. There are a few ways to eject a drive. First, you can open your main menu using either method, go to Media, and you'll see an Eject option. Hit OK, and your media will eject with a pop-up telling you when it's safe to remove. You can also access the media through a quick access menu. If you touch and hold anywhere on the top info bar, a quick menu will pop up, and it is an expanded view of the entire status menu, just laid out vertically. And I find if I'm using touch controls, this menu is much easier to use as the buttons and icons are larger. This menu also provides more detailed media information for clip count, capacity, percentage readout, and card model. Click on media and it'll pull up the same menu as before where we can eject the card. This is the same menu you'll use for formatting media. Simply navigate to secure format. And if you'd like, here you can adjust metadata for camera ID, which changes the letter displayed in the red digital record button, camera position, reel number, and edge code, which affects your time code. This info is helpful for any multicam productions, so you can differentiate footage from those different cameras. Although if I'm only using one camera, I don't generally bother with this. We can adjust most of these in our project settings, but I find it easier to set them now as they will write to the card after formatting. When you are ready to clear the card, hit OK on format and then Yes to execute. This will take a moment depending on the size of the card, so let it run and a pop-up will inform you when it's finished. Now, let's close the menu and get back to our main UI. If you want to move one menu stage back or close the menu, I find it easiest to use the menu button, as one push will take you one menu back and a short hold will fully exit the menu. In contrast, to navigate one page back using touch controls, you'll need to hit the tiny media word in the menu path to move back, or repress the top status bar to pull up the quick bar. You can fully exit the menu by touching the red logo in the top left corner. And this is really where I find the one failing in trying to solely use the touchscreen controls. At times it adds some extra steps because of how you have to back through the menu, so I tend to use a combination of touchscreen and buttons to navigate. I use the menu button to access and close the menu, but touchscreen to navigate within. Really, it's your choice on whatever feels the easiest and most intuitive to you. Continuing right along our status bar, you'll see a green TE and some grayed out options. The T and E show calibration information for the camera's sensor. As long as they are green, you're good to go. If you see either of these turn yellow or red, you will need to calibrate, which is available in the maintenance settings by selecting Calibrate. Next to this are Genlock, Timecode, and Sync. These options are only accessible when using the optional I/O expander or a compatible cable through the extension port. When a sync and Genlock are achieved, these options will highlight. To set the time code, you'll want to open the main menu and navigate to Audio/TC. For now, we're only focused on the bottom three options for timecode, as the rest of the audio options are the same as what we covered earlier in the quick menu, just an alternative way to adjust them. Timecode source will allow you to choose between the camera's internal time and date or external. To jam sync, choose external and connect your timecode source. Once it is found, the TC icon will turn green. If you notice the TC icon turn a solid white, it means the connection to the timecode source was lost, but the camera is still pulling from that initial jammed timecode. The other two options are only applicable if you're using the internal time and date, so let's go ahead and switch that back. Once internal time of date is selected, we'll have an option to jam timecode to time of date. We should go ahead and select that and hit OK to override the timecode we jammed in earlier. The OK box will flash with a green check mark to show that the time of date has been jammed. Finally, under that you can adjust the timecode display to show either time of date or edge, which will display an edge code set when formatting your media. Exiting the menu and continuing right, you have a 3D LUT icon, which offers a quick reference to know if you're displaying a lookup table or not. If a 3D LUT is applied, that icon will be lit white. Next to that, you'll have a camera icon with a check mark. This is a quick reference to your camera's status. The green check mark shows that everything's working normally. We can expand this to see further details about the camera's firmware version, total runtime, as well as temperature readouts for all of our camera's components. The temperature is very important. Should the camera start overheating, you'll see a camera icon change to yellow, which is a sign for you to stop recording and allow the camera to cool before continuing. I have not experienced any overheating issues, nor have I heard reports of any issues, but I will say the Komodo does run hot. An unfortunate product of packing so much into a small body, and unfortunately, the media bay, it does sit right next to the exhaust port, so after long takes, your media can be hot, so be careful when swapping cards. If you are shooting on a hot summer day or doing long takes without breaks, you may start to run into heat issues, so be sure to keep an eye on this. Should the camera get too hot, it will shut off for safety. Next to this, you'll see a lock icon, which is currently open. If we want to lock camera settings so they can't be adjusted, you can press in the up and down arrows simultaneously. The icon will change to a white lock icon. This makes it so that all of your exposure settings cannot be changed. Since it is so quick to toggle on and off, it's a helpful way to make sure exposure remains consistent when it's needed. Finally, we have our power readout in the top right. It'll display an icon showing the remaining power in each of the 2 batteries. You can even expand it to view each battery's voltage by tapping the status bar and selecting the lightning bolt icon. We include 2 RED 6300 mAh batteries, which will have an approximate runtime of about 90 minutes. But you can also use Canon BP955 batteries. Those are just smaller in capacity at 5200 milliamps, so you can expect a runtime of approximately 60 minutes. Bear in mind the exact runtime will vary depending on the exact camera settings. I'm a huge fan of hot swappable batteries, and the Komodo makes it super easy. When 2 batteries are connected, the first battery port will drain fully before the second, allowing you to keep the camera powered by the second while we change the first. But the camera will also auto switch over to the first battery if the second's pulled. So as long as you have a fresh battery in one of the 2 ports at any time, your camera will never stop recording. This is a huge help for remote productions or stuff on gimbals where DC power just isn't an option. I do want to note one issue I found with the Komodo, and it's switched from battery to AC power. Most cameras I've worked with will automatically switch from AC to battery if the AC power is lost. It's helpful for a number of reasons, but I would use this for live streams, where every camera got an AC power but would also receive a fully stocked battery as backup. So should a camera operator accidentally pull a cable or talent trip on a wire, the camera would continue broadcasting. A lot of AC cables don't lock into camera, so they can be pulled out much easier than an SDI cable. Unfortunately though, through my testing, the Komodo really wanted to be on battery power. If I was on an AC and attached a battery, the camera would actually power down so that it could switch to battery power, killing any recording I had going. If I attached AC and then pulled all the batteries, the camera would actually power off as if it had low voltage, as opposed to switching to AC power. And this was a bigger holdup than I thought, as I would need to switch the camera off, disconnect all power, and then reconnect the AC before powering on and continue recording. While this was a little surprising, I ultimately don't think it's a huge issue, but definitely something to be aware of so you don't accidentally get caught by surprise. I could definitely see this biting me during a live broadcast if I hadn't known. This hopefully will be fixed in future firmware updates, but at least as of recording this video, it had not been. Ultimately, you'll need to just make a choice between battery or AC. And if you choose AC, you'll have to remove all the batteries from the back and know that you'll need to power off completely before you change where the camera's being powered from. Thankfully, the AC cable is a locking LEMO style connector, so it would be difficult to accidentally remove the cable. With the main interface covered, let's dive into our main menu and really customize the Komodo's settings. In the main menu, majority of our main record settings will be adjusted in either image LUT or project settings. Image LUT will control exposure settings, while project settings will adjust your camera's resolution or codec. I recommend setting record settings prior to exposure, so we'll start under project settings. First, you'll have the format option. This determines which area your sensor's imaging from and the highest frame rate that can be recorded. As you adjust this lower, the camera's sensor is cropped, and as a result, it'll be able to handle more data from frame rate. So your frame rate limit increases. Since the imaging area is being cropped though, your field of view will be cropped as well. The effective crop factor for each adjustment and frame rate limit goes 6K, no crop, with a max of 40 frames per second, 5K, a 1.2 times crop with a max of 48 frames per second, 4K with a 1.5 times crop and a max of 60 frames per second, and then 2K with a whopping 3 times crop, but a max frame rate of 120 frames per second. This means the effective field of view of a 50mm lens will change to 60mm in 5K, 75mm in 4K, and 150mm in 2K. You'll want to be aware of this, as the frame rate limit affects both R3D and ProRes files. So you can shoot 120 FPS, but your field of view will be 3 times smaller to do so. This is where I feel the camera's ProRes recording really shines, as the ProRes recording resolution can be downsampled from your sensor, meaning you can shoot 4K or 2K ProRes using the full 6K sensor resolution without the field of view loss, as long as you shoot neither 24 or 30 frames per second. This allows you to crop the camera's sensor only when you need access to higher frame rates, offering more flexibility in capture. Selecting format will bring up a slightly different window depending on which codec you're in. ProRes will go directly to a white list of all available sensor resolutions. You'll have 6K in a few different aspect ratios, as well as your cropped sensor resolutions. If you're recording RAW, you'll have a submenu with 3 options. Super 35mm 6K lists all of the aspect ratios available in 6K capture. Super 35mm anamorphic will list all anamorphic options, and all formats will list all of the options, including those lower than 6K. Note that anamorphic D-squeeze is only available in 6K RAW. Below format, you'll see options for recording frame rate and project time base. Now, we've covered your recording frame rate, but your project time base can be set either 24, 30, or 60 frames per second, either as its digital broadcast frame rate or a true cinema frame rate. To change your recording codec, navigate to File Format, select, and switch to ProRes. You will notice that the camera will need to reboot whenever you switch your codec from ProRes or RAW. This only takes a few moments but will fully shut down the camera, so make sure you disconnect SDI cables before you do this. Further below the menu, you'll see some options for R3D quality, which you can use to adjust the RAW compression settings, but only when in RAW recording mode. You'll have options for HQ, MQ, and LQ that we discussed earlier. Scrolling down, you'll see further options for ProRes control, including ProRes resolution and codec. You'll have options to shoot in 4K, UHD, 2K, and HD. And this list auto-adjusts as the sensor's resolution changes. So if your sensor's set to 2K, you'll only have options for 2K and HD. Further down, you'll see ProRes codec, which adjusts between 422HQ and standard ProRes, as well as ProRes baked-in settings, which adjust ProRes from flat log to a recorded look. RAW will always be recorded as log. There are 2 more helpful options at the bottom of our project settings menu. There's pre-record and slate. Slate allows you to adjust any camera ID or position info that you set earlier when formatting your card. Pre-record turns on a continuous video buffer that records a determined amount of frames prior to you hitting the record button. This helps a lot if you're capturing live footage or difficult slow motion shots, by ensuring you don't miss the action by hitting the record button just slightly too late. You can turn on and adjust the pre-recording buffer by selecting pre-record and toggling the switch to green. Once on, the duration will turn white and can be adjusted. The duration options are limited by your sensor and recording format. In 6K RAW, you can select up to a 1.5 second buffer, but can expand this up to a 30-second buffer in HD ProRes. Below the duration, you'll see the exact amount of frames that'll be pre-recorded. Once pre-record is turned on in our settings, we must put the camera into pre-recording mode before it'll start the active video buffer. To do this, exit the menu and hit the record button once, and you'll see the record button in frame turn yellow and say pre-recording. This has turned on the active buffer. So now we can hit the record button anytime we like, and the previously specified amount of time will also be recorded. You will notice that once we stop recording, the camera will finish writing but not return to pre-recording mode. We'll then need to press the record button to re-trigger the pre-record mode. If you're using this feature, bear in mind that unless the camera is in this yellow pre-recording mode, the video buffer is not turned on and will not be recording. If you are in pre-record mode but don't want to record, you can exit pre-record without rolling by pressing and holding the touchscreen record button for a brief moment. At this point, you'll have to make an informed decision as to what codec is right for your production. There are pros and cons to both, and ultimately it'll be up to you to make that choice. Looking at them side by side, ProRes offers the best recording times, beating out everything but LQ RAW. For comparison, using the 512GB CFast recording 4K 24 frames per second and HQ RAW has 43 minutes of record time, but can be expanded to 109 minutes in MQ. On the other hand, HQ ProRes gives us 86 minutes or 129 minutes in standard. Because of this, I really don't find myself utilizing the LQ RAW at all. While it offers more record time, the trade-off of additional artifacts from compression just aren't worth it when I can use ProRes and capture great 4K. Honestly, the ProRes wins out in most scenarios, unless I know my editor has the time to grade log footage. I would much rather use ProRes's baked-in LUT to capture footage that is faster and easier to finish than RAW or log. Plus, with ProRes's downscaling, I won't have to be as worried about my sensor being cropped, allowing me to focus on being creative instead. RAW will remain the superior option for those needing the utmost quality, such as VFX, anamorphic, or shots that aren't worried about record time and have the post team to support finishing the footage. RAW will offer the most dynamic range and will also allow you to adjust your ISO in post, giving much more control over each scene. But all of that information is taxing. To shoot uncropped, uncompressed 6K RAW, you only have 30 minutes of record time per 512GB of media. So that fills incredibly fast. So weigh all of the factors and choose the options best suited for your production, budget, and needs. But more often than not, I find myself landing on ProRes. Once you've determined your record settings, let's move back to the image LUT settings. The top of this menu offers alternative ways to set your ISO, shutter, and white balance. And below that, you'll see some important options for adjusting how the camera output is displayed. When shooting R3D, these can be adjusted in post, but in ProRes, these will be baked in. Color space gives you a few options for different color standards. There's DCI-P3, the Digital Cinema Initiative's theater projector standard, Rec 709, the standard color space for HD TV and the default option, Rec 2020, the standard color space for UHD and HDR, and RED Wide Gamut RGB, a color space encompassing all of the colors the RED camera can generate without clipping. Select the one that's best for your needs, and if you aren't sure, as with most of these, the default option is generally best for most scenarios. Output Tone Map will let you adjust the image contrast. You'll have 4 levels: low, medium, high, and none. Medium being the default, and none offering the flattest image. Lastly, Highlight Roll-Off offers 5 options: very soft, soft, medium, hard, and none. And this determines how much compression is applied to your highlights. And I found it really affected overexposed areas. Without any compression, overexposed areas were very noticeable and distracting. I'm sure when shooting RAW, you'll maintain more information in your highlights if you shoot without compression, but when not shooting log, I much prefer the look of the softer roll-off. Further down, you can adjust your display preset. SDR, for standard dynamic range, is best for most productions, but if you're shooting for HDR, high dynamic range, or HLG, hybrid log gamma delivery, you can adjust that here. We'll keep ours at SDR. Next is our 3D LUT control. For RAW recording, this is merely a color reference tool, but when recording ProRes, we can choose to bake this look into our footage. There are a few built-in looks, and we can also import our own custom LUTs in the .cube format. First, let's enable the 3D LUT. Then, we can select LUT and choose from all of the available options. Starting from the top, you'll have achromatic, film bias, film bleach bypass, and film bias offset. Achromatic is black and white. Film bias and film bias offset are basically the same, just one has its exposure offset. And I liked these as they offered a good balance between contrast and saturation. Bleach bypass, it definitely has a look to it, but I found it a bit too desaturated for general use. You can also load in your own LUTs. To do so, they'll need to be loaded into the root file structure in a folder named LUTs, all lowercase, on your media. and need to be in the .cube format. Once they are loaded properly, they'll display in the On Media LUTs list. You can also import On Media LUTs to the camera by selecting them and hitting Import. Ultimately, all the B-roll we captured on the Komodo for this video used the Rec. 709 color space, high tone mapping, and very soft roll-off, with the film bias look. Below this, you'll see CDL, which stands for Color Decision List, an additional amount of metadata that can be recorded about the colors in the image using a standard developed by the ASC. Most productions will not need this, but your colorist or VFX artist may ask for it. So if needed, you can toggle this on and either adjust the settings internal or load in files from your media, similar to loading in custom LUTs. Lastly, below this you'll have Exposure Adjust, which allows you to adjust the mid-tone exposure level plus or minus up to 8 stops. This offers even more control over your image and exposure, but for most applications, 0 will work best. Now we have our record settings and exposure settings covered, so let's move to our more advanced monitor settings. Select Monitoring from your main menu, and here we can adjust video outputs as well as advanced tools like focus peaking and zebras. The top section offers individual control for the Komodo's 3 main video outputs: LCD, SDI, and Livestream. Under LCD, we can adjust the brightness of the onboard touchscreen display as well as its look. You have 2 main look options, either a red wide gamut RGB log 3G10, the ungraded log footage, or image LUT, which displays your previously selected LUT and is the default option. Below this, there are 2 toggle switches to toggle on or off monitoring guides and monitoring tools. These allow you to send only certain image tool information to each of your monitors. SDI is very similar, but does offer some additional signal controls, so you can make sure that the Komodo's output is compatible with the monitor that you're connecting. So, you can adjust the SDI output with both resolution and frequency controls. The Komodo can output up to 4K video at 5994 Hz. If you're having issues getting the Komodo's SDI signal into your monitor, I recommend setting resolution to 1080p and frequency at 5994. I find that to be the most reliable settings for most monitors, but you may need to try a combination. You may notice that when outputting either 1080p or 4K UHD, that there are small letterbox bars on the SDI output. This is due to the Komodo's sensor actually being 17:9 and not 16:9. Due to this, the 17:9 output is downscaled to fit on the 16:9 display, causing the letterboxes. These will not be recorded in your final image. Below this, you'll find the same look, guides, and tool controls as your LCD, as well as additional options for overlay. Overlay adjusts the amount of camera information that is overlaid on your SDI output, and you can toggle this on and off, as well as adjusting the mode from a simple to an advanced mode. If you need a clean video feed, either for broadcast, recording, or anything else, you'll want the overlay to be off. Advanced mode will display all of your camera settings, the color histogram, as well as audio meters, and I find this helpful for onboard and AC monitors. Simple will show only the clip name, the runtime, and a red icon when recording. This I find great for client or video village monitors. There's less extraneous information, but it maintains critical stuff like what take you're on and if you're rolling. Livestream uses the Komodo's new Wi-Fi capabilities to stream a live feed of the camera over Wi-Fi. The rest of the Wi-Fi capabilities are controlled in a different area of the menu, but if you want to utilize any wireless video, you will need to turn this on here. You can also adjust the quality of the stream from high, medium, and low. Low will compress the image, which results in added noise and artifacts, but will also be able to stream over a larger area because of this. So adjust as needed for your situation. Further down, you'll have tools and guides. Let's first look at guides, as it's the less involved of the two. This offers a few different overlay guides, 3 custom overlays, and a center marker. These might be used for a variety of reasons and offer full custom control from scale, color, opacity, and more. So instead of going over every way you can adjust them, here are 2 of the most useful guides that I use. First is a simple 16:9 reference frame. Let's select and enable Frame Guide 1. For mode, we'll select 16:9, scroll down, and we'll keep scale at 100 and offsets at 0. And further down, we'll select solid line color and choose a contrasting line color. like yellow, and I keep the line opacity at 50%. We can exit our menu and you can see the yellow safety guide that we've created. This is important due to the Komodo's sensor being wider than a typical video frame at 17 by 9. So, if we want to use our full sensor resolution but finish for a 16 by 9 aspect ratio, either the sides of our image will get cropped or we'll have to add letterboxes. To make sure that if we crop, we don't cut off anything important, you can use this guide to see what on the edges of the image will be cropped off. So, as you're filming, you can keep all of the action within this yellow frame. Of course, you could also adjust the sensor aspect ratio to 16 by 9, but I like the extra breathing room 17 by 9 gives me on the sides of my frame, so I find this guide helpful. The second one we'll use actually requires both frame guide 2 and 3, and for us to custom set some settings. To start, open and enable guide 2. For mode, we'll select user, and below that, we will customize our user aspect ratio to 5:1. I find it easier to use the touchscreen keyboard for this, and when finished, just hit the OK button in the right. We'll keep the scale at 100%, but we will scroll down and set a dashed line style and leave white as the line color. We will then duplicate these same settings to guide 3, but with one minor change. Our user aspect ratio will be 0.65:1. Once we have both of these guides set, let's exit our menu, and you can see that these two dashed lines create a rule of thirds grid across our image. I find these grids very helpful, especially if you're trying to frame quickly on the fly. So I was really bummed when I found that the Komodo had no internal grid option. So I experimented with a few values and found these to be the most reliable. So this was my guide setup for most of the B-roll that I captured for this video. These guides are completely optional, of course, but you can start to see the different ways you can utilize them to help with framing your image. This leaves us with our monitoring tools. To start, let's take a look at the focus tools under peaking. Peaking offers 3 modes for the look of the peaking. By selecting the mode, we can choose between focus, edge, or peaking. Focus gives a slight boost and white highlight to the in-focus areas without changing the look or the color of our image. Edge blacks out your image so you can only see the highlights that are added to the edge of in-focus objects. And peaking adds colored edges to in-focus areas, but allows the user to control the strength of the edge and the color. All 3 have reasonable applications, but I find peaking to be the most useful out of the bunch. The extra control and the ability to change colors makes it the most useful to me. Maybe it's just because I started using peaking on Sony cameras years ago, but I really like red focus peaking when I'm pulling focus. So the flexibility wins me out. That's all the focus tools, so let's go back and take a look at exposure tools, starting with false color, which offers an optional color overlay that represents exposure data in your image and is a great tool for finding a balanced exposure. You have 2 main options for false color, exposure mode and video mode. Exposure mode offers a simple 2-color reference to help identify over and underexposed areas. Majority of the image will appear monochrome. Areas that are overexposed will show red, and areas that are underexposed will show purple. A little red or purple on the edges or shadows of your image is okay, but if you're seeing either on your subject or in detailed areas, it's a sign that you need to either adjust exposure or your lighting. Video mode offers a more detailed color spectrum, representing IRE values to help compare various exposure levels across the image. It uses purple and red, but also teal and blue to represent deep shadows and areas on the verge of becoming black, and then straw, yellow, and orange for highlights as they grow closer to white. Green and pink then represent your middle gray and average skin tone. You can then use these colors as a guide to balance and adjust exposure across the image so various highlights or subjects maintain similar exposure. IRE values range from 0 for purple or underexposed, 40 to 48 for green or middle gray, and 100 for red or overexposed. For further help finding exposure, you can toggle on a log view. This overrides your LCD image displaying the flat log look for quick reference. This doesn't affect your recorded image, so most of the time it will be off, but it is helpful for quick reference. You can also utilize 2 different zebras independently. These allow you to specify ranges of IRE values. Any area of your image that falls within that range will have a series of diagonal dashes overlaid on it. By default, Zebra 1 represents overexposed areas, and Zebra 2 represents areas approximately at middle gray. But by selecting either zebra, you can adjust the value ranges to whatever you like. Once you have everything set to values you're happy with, let's exit our menu so I can show you a quick tool menu that I skipped over earlier. This is a quick toggle menu that you can access if you tap the goalposts on the touchscreen. It'll pull up a small screen with buttons for all of the tools that we just discussed, as well as focus magnifying. Each of these can be switched on with a tap so that all of these tools can be used simultaneously to help you capture the best image. This makes it easy to switch between tool sets and really take advantage of all the Komodo offers. The last few sections of our menu are pretty straightforward. Presets lets you create a user profile that can quickly be loaded either from camera or from the media, making it easier to match settings either between cameras or shoot days. System settings allow you to set system info, such as time and date, as well as view detailed camera statuses. And lastly, maintenance allows you to adjust the camera's calibration or factory reset settings. With that, we've made it through all of the basics and the tools you'll need to get started shooting. But we did skip over one major section of the menu: communication. This houses all of the advanced functionality to connect the Komodo to other devices. While there are a few options here, the vast majority of shooters will only need the Wi-Fi section. But so that you know what they all do, let's briefly touch on each option. Camera will simply change the display name for the Komodo, and by default, it's just Komodo. Serial configures the serial connection to the extension port on the Komodo's expander. FTPS stands for File Transfer Protocol Secure, and it's a way to securely transfer data to and from the camera using FTP software on a computer. If you want to learn more about this, RED has a great FTPS configuration guide you can follow online. And this leaves us with Wi-Fi. The Komodo can connect via Wi-Fi for both monitor and camera control, to computer browsers through IP address, phones using the RED Control app, or even live stream software through direct IP link. This makes working with the Komodo incredibly easy. Earlier in the video, we made sure to turn on our live stream monitor. If you skipped ahead though, start by going to Menu, Monitoring, Live Stream, and Enable. To enable Wi-Fi, select Mode, and we'll have to choose between Ad Hoc or Infrastructure. In Ad Hoc, the Komodo will send out its own Wi-Fi signal that devices can connect to. This works great for remote control or viewing. Infrastructure connects the Komodo to an existing Wi-Fi network, such as your home Wi-Fi or a wireless hotspot. This allows any device connected to that network to access and view the Komodo, or for live streaming software to send out the Komodo feed for a live stream. We'll first set up an ad hoc connection to my phone so that I can use the RED Control app to interface with the camera. Once ad hoc mode is selected, move down and open the ad hoc setting menu. Let's work through the options together. SSID is the network name for the Komodo. I generally leave this unchanged, but if you're using multiple cameras, you can use this to easily rename the connection to something like Komodo A or Camera 1. Passphrase is the password for the Komodo's network, and by default, it'll match the SSID. So let's make ours easier for the demo. You do have to make it at least 8 characters long, so ours will be ABCD1234. Confirm by hitting the OK in the bottom. We can then select which wireless band we'd like to be on, 2.4 or 5 GHz. 5 GHz is default and recommended for wireless video streaming. 2.4 GHz is recommended for long distance control when you're not streaming video. Below this, we can adjust the channel the Wi-Fi signal is being sent on, and you'll notice that the available channels will update based on which band you've selected. If you are getting wireless interference, you can try switching to a different channel or even using software to identify the channels in your area that are currently being used so that you can select the least populated channel. The bottom 2 options are just displays showing the Wi-Fi's encryption and status. Now that all of that is set up, let's move to my phone. First thing I'll do is launch the RED Control app, and you'll notice that it's all black and nothing is connected. That's because we need to connect our phone to the Komodo's network for it to show up here. So let's open our Wi-Fi settings and find the Komodo's network within our available options. It is Komodo A, and our password is ABCD1234. You may get a pop-up saying that Wi-Fi is unavailable, and that's okay. It's because you're not connected to the internet, but rather the Komodo's direct network. Move back to RED Control and hit Rescan to pull up our Komodo. I can then select the Komodo to pull up the full RED Control program. Here, we can control everything with just a tap. There are also page controls to switch between look, audio, focus, and more. This is a very handy tool for a variety of situations, whether you can't reach the camera or are a single operator needing a simple external monitor. But what if I don't have the RED Control app, or I need a director to view from Video Village? Well, even if you're in ad hoc mode, you can still connect a computer or browser through a direct IP link. First, connect the computer to the Komodo's ad hoc network. Next, open a browser of your choice, in this case Chrome. In order to connect, we'll need to type in the Komodo's IP address in our search bar. You can find this by going back to our RED Control app and hitting the Wi-Fi bars in the top left corner to navigate back to the main menu. Below our camera, you'll see a code, in this case 192.168.1.1. This is our IP address. So, if we type this into our web browser, you can pull up a similar looking page to the RED Control app. This will allow camera control from any device with a Wi-Fi connection and web browser. In this case though, we're talking about this being at Video Village, so I really don't want Video Village accidentally changing any camera settings. So, what we can do is add a :9090 at the back of our IP address in the browser. This is a special code that only displays image feed and not any camera controls. This way, we don't need to worry about someone in Video Village accidentally changing our frame rate or something like that. But what if we needed to stream the Komodo feed? That would require the computer to both be connected to the Komodo and the internet simultaneously. Well, that's where infrastructure mode comes in. So let's change that now. When we open the infrastructure menu, you'll notice that it looks a little different. We'll start under networks, and here we can see all available networks. In this case, I'm going to connect to Magnanimous Media Guest. It will then ask for the passphrase for the network, type yours in, and hit OK. Once it connects, you'll see the name of the connected network in SSID, and the status should read connected. Below this, you'll also see a toggle for DHCP. Unless you want to manually configure all of your network settings, you'll want to keep that on. Now that the camera is connected to our network, any computer on that network can type in its IP address and pull up the RED Control feed, or use the additional :9090 code for an image-only view. This same IP address can be used to stream the feed using programs like OBS. Just be sure that if you want to live stream video only, to include that :9090 code. Otherwise, you'll send your whole control view. A big note here regarding Wi-Fi connections and streaming. These signals can easily run into interference, either due to the Wi-Fi signal being low, because too many devices are trying to connect, or because of other competing signals in the area. If you are going to be relying on the Wi-Fi connectivity, be sure to plan ahead, as well as scout the frequency environment of your location prior to production. Some best practices to try and follow: limit the total number of devices on any given network, and hardline any connections whenever possible, especially on live stream productions. With that disclaimer out of the way, I love the RED Control app. As someone who's had to work with RED cameras on gimbals for years now, this offers a whole new level of ease of use. For a camera this small and tiny, it will likely be used in many hard-to-reach places, so the freedom to step away without needing to have anything set beforehand is incredibly liberating. Now you know the ins and outs of the RED Komodo, one of my personal favorite cameras to release in the last few years. I never expected such a small camera to fit into so many applications, but RED really knocked this one out of the park. Whether you need a quick and easy camera to capture great footage, a B camera for rigging in tight places, or a broadcast camera for live streaming, or a travel documentary camera, the Komodo really can do it all. I hope you found this video helpful, and if there are any questions you have that we didn't cover in the video, let me know. And as always, if you're interested in renting any of the gear you see in these videos, give us a call or visit magrents.com.